I want to talk about wide receivers for a little bit because it's a strange class overall in that, you hear a lot, there's no Jamar Chase in this draft class, as if that's a reasonable bar to set in the first place. But it feels like maybe the top guys are not necessarily maybe as good as a lot of other classes, but I think there's a ton of strength and depth. And as soon as you get into the second, third round, there's all sorts of guys that I find myself liking, a lot of whom seem to have been at the Senior Bowl. Tank Dell was my number 4 wide receiver when we did our rankings. I really love Jonathan Mingo as well, Michael Wilson. Like a ton of these guys, I think ended up having really, really impressive tape and yet are generally on the consensus board lower down than some of the other players.
Yeah, I think what happens inevitably with some of the underclassmen, again, it sounds biased. I work for the Senior Bowl. I get it. But I just think with some of these underclassmen, they come out, and because they come out, there's just this assumption that they are the top guys at their position. And so for me, it's a little different. I don't get to watch these guys until, I don't watch them until we get through the Senior Bowl. And then the narrative's already been set. Like when I worked in the NFL, I wasn't on social media. I didn't have a Twitter account. You try to block out all the noise, you make your eval for yourself. And then, once you have a firm opinion on a player, then it's okay to see what else is out there. But because of this job, you guys know I kind of live on Twitter, unfortunately. And so I know the narrative on these players. And then when I go to watch some of them, I'm like, man, I can't believe this guy's been being talked about as first round pick. And I think there's a lot of examples in this year's wide receiver class of that. And I think you named 3 from our game, and I would add Jaden Reed from Michigan State. That's another guy that I don't think is being talked about enough. Again, from an NFL's perspective, the Mingos, the Tank Dells, all these guys, that Michael Wilson, I thought had an unbelievable week. I think he's very underrated.
Yeah.
They've seen it, right? They've seen him against press coverage. They've seen him against some of the best corners in this draft class. They've seen him at the top of routes. They've seen the play strength. They've seen all this. So what you're trying to do as a staff is just erase the blind projection. And Steve, you hit it on it earlier, like it really becomes a projection. So if you haven't seen it, we used to call those blind projections. So that's what the All-Star game process can do, is just eliminate that, wipe that out. You think Cody Mauch can play center? Well, then he comes down in Mobile and plays center and looks good at it. Okay, well, now we know he can do it. So, yeah, this receiver class, I think that the meat of this class, I think you're going to get a lot of really good number 3 and number 4 receivers out of this year's draft in those 3rd and 4th round areas, maybe even the 2nd. I think there's a lot of 2s, 3s, and 4s. I don't know if there's any number 1s.
Do you think guys like Jonathan Mingo and Michael Wilson are going to get bumped up because so many of the top receivers are a little bit undersized? A lot of the even fringe first rounders, I would call Zay Flowers maybe fringe first, Josh Downs. You mentioned, Sam, Tank Dell is your number 4 wide receiver. You might be higher on Dell than anyone else. These guys are all smaller. Is that going to help Mingo and Wilson, for teams that are looking for a little bit more physicality on the outside?
I think so. I definitely think so. And Tank was whatever he was here, 166 pounds or 163 pounds, whatever he was. So I'll say this. I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth here now. But, with the smaller receivers, it's not like it used to be 15, 20 years ago. Like when I got into this thing, you needed guys that could hold up physically and work the middle of the field. And like the Troy Browns, going back to my time in New England, the Troy Browns, the Wes Welkers, like you don't need to have that level of substance and physicality. You need some of it, but you don't need as much. It's more of a space game to protect those players. So I get that part of it. But when you're looking at this year's class and you got a Jonathan Mingo who's 220 some pounds, 200 low 220s, and a guy that's in the 160s, or the Zay Flowers and the Jordan Addisons, and those guys are in the 170s. That's a 50-pound difference. And I'll never forget this. Like when I first got into scouting, one of the mantras was it's a big man's game. And I don't think teams get too far away from that. It truly is a big man's game. So, yeah, I think Mingo is a guy that when you talk to wide receivers coaches, I may try to make a point on this in a post last week. You talk to receivers coaches around the league, he's kind of the guy right now that they're all pushing for. And then Michael Wilson's another guy because he's a bigger guy. And then both of those two guys are interviewing off the charts. And that's the hard part for what we do right now, is that we're not privy to the interviews and the board work. So we don't know how these guys are coming across from like a football intelligence standpoint. Those are two guys that I know specifically that have really helped themselves on the interview part of it.
Yeah, I really like Mingo. I think he's a massively underrated guy. I think the point you bring up is good, though, that it's definitely not what it used to be in terms of needing that size and physicality. But the last couple of years in particular, we've reached this point now where we're almost testing the extreme boundaries of that size stuff, right? Like Devontae Smith, I think, was the first guy really to come along. Like, I'm 166 pounds. And that's it. I'm not going to try and put on 15 pounds of fake weight before the combine or before the draft. I play at 166, and that's what it's going to be. And by the way, I won the Heisman doing that, so it's fine, right? And that was kind of the first stake in the ground of just saying, look, this is the weight. But people are still, it's still going to scare people away. So what I'm really looking for is, back me up. Why is Tank Dell going to be good despite being 160 something?
I love Tank too. I'll say, just getting back to the Devontae point, because I've seen this. Devontae Smith is exceedingly better than any receiver in this draft.
Yes.
Let's just go there. We talk about outlier, like he's an outlier as well. We talk about Josh Allen being an outlier.
Definitely.
Let's not compare guys in the 160s and 170s to Devontae Smith. His tape was ridiculous. I mean, that dude was different now. But I think Tank's going to be successful because of the route running. I mean, he's so quick off the line. He's got a great release package, so he's going to be hard to get your hands on. And then at the top of the route, he's so dang good. And he catches it clean, and he transitions, run to catch really well. So he's just a really, really skilled player. To me, just in terms of skill level, like I think Jordan Addison is a really skilled wide receiver and a real natural and instinctive wide receiver. But I just think there's another level of dynamicism, dynamic ability, if you will. I think I might have just made up a word there, dynamicism.
That's how I say it.
But Tank is different. When you put on the tape, the twitch, the suddenness, he's just he's borderline special that way. So I think he's going to be a really good slot receiver for whoever, kind of rolls the dice and takes a 165-pound guy.
Jim, that's how I say it. I try to say dynamism. I try to say it something like that, and then Sam always corrects me and says it's dynamism. Or something like, is that right?
I'm just going to stop you making up words, yeah.
Because I'm trying to say dynamic, and then you have to add a mism to it. It's a tough one. You had this tweet showing Tank Dell with the scissors release. I don't know if we can get it up on the screen quick enough, but the Senior Bowl one-on-ones. I know. Are you like a dad that you can't root for for one kid over the other? Senior Bowl one-on-ones, they're all your children, right? So if a DB gets burnt or something like that, we don't want to trash him, but you have to highlight when Tank Dell makes the cornerbacks, kind of look bad like he did at the Senior Bowl. He had some unbelievable one-on-one reps, and I think that was. I mean, I know that's all you want. That's all you want to see, right? Dominate the Senior Bowl, and they have your heart. But Tank was unbelievable at some of those one-on-ones.
Yeah, he was, and I do try to be careful with some of this stuff that I post, but I think one of them was against Darius Rush. I posted something on Mingo the other day, and he caught Darius Rush flat-footed and made Rush look bad. But I've also posted some clips of Rush, who had an awesome week as well, where he was really dialed in and had some great coverage plays. But yeah, I try to be careful on who I'm showing getting beat. That's for sure.
We're talking corners tomorrow. Darius Rush he had one of the best and worst reps I think I saw at the Senior Bowl. He had the rough one that you mentioned, but he had that one where he ran the comeback route for the receiver to pick it off, which it didn't look like a skill that Darius Rush has on tape. Although he's more of like a press man type of guy, but it was awesome. We'll talk about him tomorrow though.